Hello and welcome to State of State. This podcast is presented by Bet Online, your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting, plus your favorite casino and card games available to play right on your phone. Head to betonline.ag or use your mobile device to join, and be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. State of State is presented by Bet Online, where the game starts. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. And if you're looking for the perfect beer for Penn State football season, we've got you covered with the State IPA. Special thanks to our friends at Funk Brewing for creating the best tailgate and game day beer for Nittany Lion fans. State IPA will be available at beer distributors, grocery stores, Funk's tap rooms, plus select bars and restaurants beginning on Thursday, August 31st. Visit funkbrewing.com/beers/state-IPA to learn where and how you can get State IPA. Visit the website in the description of this podcast for more information. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Penn State's training camp is ongoing. Plenty of news and updates to dive into. There's been a lot of opportunities, Justin, for the public, the fans, to kind of get a look at this team a little bit more than usual than we've gotten used to under James Franklin. Some open scrimmages, some open practices, which is very odd. Like, that just doesn't happen that often under James Franklin. Likes to keep everything close to the vest and, not allowing fans to take videos and pictures of stuff, obviously wanting to have a competitive advantage. But this has been really interesting to see the program kind of open up its doors that way. And as a result, we're learning a lot more. The layperson, at least, is learning a lot more about this team. But overall, you have fabulous connections, obviously, to the team. What's the overall vibe you're feeling from the team right now?
I mean, the vibe from the team is, got to come ready to play and meet the expectations. I feel from just talking to different people, is everybody just getting on the same page. Obviously, at the beginning of camp, the defense is ahead of the offense when we come to the development of actually operating. We looked at the athletic article from the open practice and talk about the defense dominating. But one, Penn State having an elite defense, you would expect them to be a little bit ahead of the offense at this moment. But at the same time, it seems like a lot of promise of where the offense is and where they're moving towards. And just to piggyback on what you said, the practices being open, I think is extremely important when you talk about the new age of college football, NIL, and all these different aspects. I'm looking forward to not only open practices, but like all the different rules across the country where freshmen are allowed to speak. Like we saw it in the Johnny Manziel episode. I mean, Penn State used to be essential for a freshman not to be able to speak to the media, but with now NIL building out that brand and giving that full access and fan engagement, starting from like a league operations standpoint, you knew from WWE or even from being on that side, fan engagement is the key to this whole sports and entertainment business. So for coaches that want to excel and get whether it's donations or people to support, you have to provide some level of access. And I think that's what we're seeing now with these open practices in training camp, which is, it's one thing to do it in spring ball when you're, almost 6 months away from the season, but 2 weeks away, open practice, that's new day age of football, man.
Yeah. And considering that one practice was Saturday evening and it was pouring rain out and you still had fans out there in attendance. And honestly, like, there's no part of me that is shocked by that, because I have been one of those fans that sat through rainy, nasty games, horrible weather, bad situations altogether. So I get it. And there's a lot of promise for this team altogether. I wanted to hit on something you mentioned there, and there is a great article on The Athletic. Audrey Snyder, who always does a phenomenal job covering Penn State football,
Absolutely.
Talking extensively about the team. But the overall sense, a number of media outlets, a number of players, former players, coaches, whoever you talk to, the discussion surrounding this Penn State defense is not just that, oh, they're going to be good, right? It's that this could be top 5, top 3 in the country good. You were just saying kind of at this point in camp, you almost expect that just because there is that installation period with the offense where they're just trying to get things organized, and that aforementioned Saturday evening scrimmage, open practice, whatever you want to call it. The offense struggled a little bit, so it's just a matter of letting people know, like, hey, don't freak out necessarily about how Drew Aller and the rest of the team is doing on offense. But it just sounds like the more and more we hear about the defense is that this would be one of the best defenses Penn State has seen under James Franklin. What do you feel?
I mean, I feel that way too. I think it was some glimpses of that last year. We've just seen the type of explosive plays, the length that they had on defense. Obviously, they had Joey Porter and some other guys out there, but just the speed, the team speed in general, right? From the safeties, the secondary, the linebackers got Abdul, and then the front seven with the defensive line. I mean, just the makeup of the whole team and team speed from from a baseline standpoint is impressive to begin with. Now you add in some cohesiveness with the secondary coaches. You add in Manny coming with the exotic defense and blitz packages and things of that nature. Now you're really starting to cook with gas. And I mean, again, we saw it last year, and just think of that being elevated from another year of experience, guys playing together, understanding where you're going to be. It's a feel thing playing on defense, recognizing where someone might fill a hole and you have to make them right, or how someone might play a play in the back end. I mean, that year of working together really just shows. And so that's why you would expect that to be for them to be ahead at this point. But at the same time, just the talent and sheer athleticism and speed that they have on the defense cannot be understated.
Let's start with, I know your favorite position, defensive back, corner to be specific. Kalen King, people are talking about this guy being a first-round draft pick next year, following right on the heels of Joey Porter Jr. I believed that last season, and it sounds like everything that's gone on in camp is leaning that way. Himself and Johnny Dixon are as advertised. I personally think the world of Daquan Hardy as a third defensive back, as a third corner, as that nickel slot corner. I think he gets overlooked a little bit too often because he is in that role. And there have been some that have said, well, the corner position is thinner once you get past those top two. And I'm like, I tend to disagree. I really like what Daquan is able to do. And then even the depth they have at that position. Would you disagree that it's shallow after the first two?
I would definitely disagree. I mean, lockdown you. How can I, help beyond it being locked down you?
Being as unbiased as you can be. Yeah.
Well, you know what I'm saying? As unbiased as I can be. But no, besides it being locked down you, we talk about that star position that Daquan Hardy plays. It's essential to the glue of the defense. We talk about just where when we think of young quarterbacks, we talk about Drew Aller, where he should lean onto. It's like the tight ends, the middle of the field, those easier throws, and having a star and nickel type of cornerback like Daquan that can punt return, blitz, make plays on the back end and do different things and like cover at an elite level. I don't think the layman football fan understands how valuable and important that position is until that position is a little shaky. And it's like 3rd and 8 and someone's catching a 12-yard pass and you're just like, wait, who's that? Who's supposed to be covering this? Or if there's like a draw play and someone's not showing up to make the tackle and like things slip through, all the plays that are essentially moving the sticks type plays where there's not like a highlighted person, you really notice those when that person's not there. But the fact that those plays are sewn up when we get off the field on 3rd down, you can credit that to a strong nickel position, especially with the type of defense that Manny runs, leaving guys out. I don't want to say leave out to dry, but when you're blitzing, you're putting a lot of pressure on the people to cover. And so having guys like Johnny Dixon, having guys like Kalen King on the outside just creates another level of pressure when you're sending guys like Abdul Carter and Adisa Isaac coming off of the edge. It just creates a symphony on defense that breeds top 10 level defenses.
You played the nickel corner more so in the National Football League. You were more a boundary corner at Penn State. Where did you feel more comfortable, and can you articulate the differences between the two positions?
Sure. I would say like a corner position is how can I say it? It's an athletic based position where you're main technique based on the outside. There's only so many routes that you can cover, right? A fade route, a post, curl, comeback, maybe a dig every once in a while, quick slant. For when you're in the inside, it's a full throttle. I want to say more of a football player than just a more so hired hit to take out a receiver.
Full route tree plus run defense.
Full route tree. You have to plug in the run. You have to cover on the back end. You have to read. You have to cover tight ends. You have to blitz. You have to pick up routes going across the field. You have to read the whole entire, whole entire offense to understand exactly how they're attacking you. Sometimes you can get into a zone from playing the corner position, like, all right, this is my guy, this is my side of the field, and you kind of get locked into this, man on man type of situation, and that's why confidence is such a critical factor to have at corner. But I think the playmaking ability, smarts, and football instincts reign supreme at that nickel position.
The good thing about this Penn State cornerback group is there's youth and there's a lot of ability that comes with it. Guys like Cam Miller, Mekhi Flowers. Also, don't forget about Davian Collins is a guy that just transferred from Mississippi State as a redshirt freshman. Got a lot of other guys, Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington II, Lamont Payne Jr. Like, there's guys who are going to be able to rotate in there. But speaking of rotating in, it seems like the safety position for Penn State is where you're going to see the most guys rotating in and out. We know about Keaton Ellis, Saki Wheatley, Jalen Reed. King Mack has been a name that's come up a lot. Also, KJ Winston tends to be a guy they can put in a lot of different positions. Mack is very similar. It sounds like they put him in a lot of different positions. Also, Tony Rojas and Tamir Robinson, linebackers, but also have that somewhat of that ability to maybe drop back into coverage a little bit. And it feels like the NBA. It feels like a positionless back seven to me. I don't know exactly how to describe it. How would you articulate it?
I think that's what you're looking for when you're building out a defense from a personnel standpoint. I think I spoke about it earlier. Just having an ability to show exotic looks and never really tip off the offense of like where or what position different back end people are playing, whether it's a nickel playing safety at one position, a safety playing dime, or having rotational flexibility on that back end. And when you don't miss a beat, where like all the guys can cover, all the guys can tackle, all the guys are playmakers, it gives the defensive coordinator and the back end coaches like some weapons to deal with. And that's when you really start to weaponize the defense and you start creating turnovers and having those, elite level, stats at the end of the year. And that's why I even say that they're probably ahead, based on industry standard, but they're probably so far ahead of the offense at this point in the game.
In terms of the safety position, from what you're hearing, who could we expect to see the most of?
Oh, man, I think you mentioned it with Jalen Reed, right? When you talk about somebody that's just a sound, smart football player, one of the critical factors of playing safety outside of making plays and showing up and doing all these things is like, can coaches rely on you? I think he's one of those players. I think Keaton Ellis fits that mold as well. Saki Wheatley and KJ Winston, I think, is going to be another one that we can keep our eyes on to make a splash this year, especially from just the athletic ability, seeing them in a couple practices. It would be interesting to see his mold and where he can kind of develop into. Having a guy like Tig, Jaquan Brisker, I feel like he kind of fits in that mold. Obviously, Zaki, Keaton, and all these guys are playmakers as well. But I think there's some special stuff with KJ's on top of that.
You mentioned Jaquan Brisker, and I don't want to jump to conclusions or anything like that, but the word out of camp about King Mack, granted a freshman, roughly 5'9", 5'10", 190 pounds out of Florida,
right,
playing with violence and can really light people up, but a smart coverage guy, really, really talented. What was your feeling about King Mack when he was being recruited?
Well, King Mack, he came out of St. Thomas Aquinas, right? From what am I speaking of the right person?
You are correct. You are correct.
Yeah. Coming out of a place like that, Coach Harriet, shout out to Coach Roger Harriet. I know their head coach down there, but when you're coming out of a program like St. Thomas Aquinas, they had Hall of Famers. Sam Madison used to be a DB coach down there. Their coach has seen numerous NFL players. Jason Taylor was a coach before he moved to Miami down there. So you get a different development curve from guys coming from certain programs across the country. Some players don't recognize that, but St. Thomas Aquinas is one of those places. And especially going to South Florida and bringing a player out of there to come to the North, there's a certain profile of kid that can even do that or want to feel comfortable leaving, South Florida to come to Penn State.
It's a big leap.
It's a huge leap. And it's a profile of a kid, right? That everybody from South Florida wants to be in the middle of Pennsylvania, but for this
in
kid
the
to
snow in October. Yeah.
in the snow or whatever the case may be, sometimes it's just a cultural thing, right? I mean, if you're growing up in Florida, you just don't want to come to PA. But the fact that he did that and just where he's coming from that high school and just the development that you see from there, whether it's Asante Samuel, seeing him in the NFL with the Chargers or just different players, the Bosa brothers that went there, it's a good stock and program that players come from. So I felt good about him coming through. It's always interesting, like I said, from just a cultural standpoint, a Florida player coming to Penn State, but the talent level was always that was never a question. He always had a pretty strong high level engine coming out of high school. I mean, that's something that we always talk about, underwriting a prospect's career. Then it becomes like that culture fit, and if they can develop in their avenue in these different institutions. So to see that in him excelling at Penn State, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see what he can do once the season gets started. And again, a dude who's a freshman, do they burn a red shirt? James Franklin's really cautious about that stuff. So we'll just see how the season progresses. And that's a positive if you do have to burn it, because it means the guy's doing something right.
Right.
Along the defensive line, some unfortunate news in the last few days. Smith Vilbert, who it just seems like a guy who's been snake bit a little bit. Injuries, off the field issues. Not that he's a bad kid or anything like that, but this last thing was an injury. He's out for the remainder of the season. I believe he just wrapped up his studies, as a matter of fact. I think he just graduated. So this is just, frustrating. I imagine for him 10 times more than we could ever imagine. But when you look at the remainder of the defensive line room, there's the question at defensive tackle, which you and I have talked about a little bit, is that it's like, it's not as much size as you would like. You are going to be paying attention to that. The games against Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, those ones where you really got to get in the trenches and stop the run. But defensive end feels spectacular, to the point that people are talking about Chop Robinson as possibly the best pass rusher in America. What say you?
I mean, I'm excited. I mean, obviously we've seen what Chop did last year. I'm excited to see Adisa Isaac. If I'm gonna be completely honest, like that's my crown jewel going into this season that I would love to see have a great season. He's a great year. I mean, a breakout year, to be honest, because I remember him recruiting him out of high school and just coming out of Canarsie in Brooklyn. He was like more like a frail type basketball player, but you always saw the athletic ability that he had on the football field. Very bendy, explosive, and just those different type of traits that you see transition into an elite pass rusher. And just seeing the different rumblings of coming out of Penn State and him going to the Big Ten conference for press conferences for as a leader of the team. He's someone that I would look forward to make that splash and really get to the quarterback on the first type of moves, where it's not just hustle and chase down the quarterback type of pressures, but pressures where you're winning immediately and just throwing the ball up and getting some turnovers. So I'm really excited about Adisa Isaac.
I'm personally very excited about Dennis-Sutton, listed at about 6'5", 260. I don't think he's really even grown into his frame yet. I think which is terrifying, really, because like there's only a handful of people walking the planet with his range, his wingspan is significant, and he just seemed to be figuring things out at the back end of his freshman campaign last season. What have you heard about Dennis-Sutton this camp?
I mean, he's a guy, right? Like, I mean, just from spring, I've done a couple NIL activations with those guys through Successful Owner or whatever the name of the collective is now. But like back when we were
Valley United,
Happy Valley United. I don't think it was a different entity, whatever that might be.
Google
but
it.
I spent some time with them, and just I know one of those NIL collectives. But spending time with them through the event, you just get a sense, like you said, just the developmental aspect that he's coming through, just the maturity, and just from a defensive lineman standpoint, he is huge, right? And just like the athletic ability, and even the way that the offense, I mean, not the offense, but the coaching staff approached and put him on the second team through spring ball to get him those reps against the starting offensive line, speaks volumes to just that preparation for a coaching staff to make sure that this player is ready. So I heard about him coming out of high school and the athletic ability just from different sources in the DMV area. So I'm excited to see what he puts on the field this year.
Yeah. Defensive tackle, there's not been anything terribly illuminating, I think, necessarily that's come out of camp, unless you've heard something different.
Nah, wait and see.
Penn State fans, Smack Apparel has the best gear for talking smack on game day. Head to smackapparel.com today and be ready for week one with the Save a Couch Beat WVU shirt. Also, check out their Let There Be White tee for the whiteout game against Iowa at Beaver Stadium. There's also the Drink Up, Roar On tee, as well as the Saturdays We Are design. If you're watching this on YouTube, scan the QR code on the screen to take you to the website instantly on your phone. Visit smackapparel.com and use our promo code STATE10 at checkout for 10% off your order. That's STATE10. Again, that's smackapparel.com, promo code STATE10 at checkout. Why wear boring when you can wear Smack? Are you looking for undeniably good hair and beard care? Then Maestro's Classic is perfect for you. Maestro's has beard washes, beard oils, beard butters, plus hair gels, pomades, and now body washes. It's one brand for every man. Visit maestrosclassic.com. That's MAESTROS classic.com and use our promo code STATE20, that's STATE20 at checkout for 20% off your order. Maestro's Classic, crafting a better you. Yeah. And listen, we know the players. We know the guys like Hakeem Beamon, Amin Vano are going to rotate in at that position. Zane Durant, I'm personally expecting big things from this season, just like Dennis-Sutton really came on the back end of last season. Zane Durant, there's something to be said in football about making the most of your opportunities, regardless of when they occur, even if it's in mop-up duty, some random play that you just got to go in because the guy's helmet popped off, something like that. Zane Durant consistently made the most of his opportunities in 2022, and I have an expectation that he is going to break out this year. And there's another guy that I continue to talk about, and Jordan Vandenberg, just a weight room warrior, a dude who has the physical ability to be disruptive at defensive tackle. And I'm just curious when he's going to do that. And it's not any fault of his own. I just think it's kind of a really stacked room, and he's a little lower on the depth chart than he would probably like to be.
I mean, like similar to what I spoke about the star position on defenses when we talk about defensive tackles on the front seven, just in the sense of you don't really understand their impact until you're going full go in a real live game. So even wherever they left off last year, whatever the evaluation was from the fans, you're not going to see much or hear much through the offseason, right? Just guys that are healthy, guys are getting bigger, stronger, and ready to play. But the time will tell. I mean, week 2 or 3, when these running type teams come into the Beaver Stadium and trying to run the ball down our throat, and we'll get that answer pretty quick on who made that jump or if we're at the line that we need to be at the defensive tackle. Because I think that is essential for us being a playoff type of team. Because to get out of the Big Ten, you have to be able to stop the run, regardless of the type of athletes that you have. This is still football.
Right. It sounds like Keziah Izzard has gotten back to being healthy and being competitive. Devon Elise is somebody you're going to rely on at defensive tackle, has had some family off the field difficulties, unfortunately, recently. So condolences to the Elise family. And a guy that, I don't necessarily want to bank on seeing a lot of him, but he had a pretty good showing in the blue-white game. And, it's something that James Franklin talks about in regards to PJ Mustipher was, a big guy, 310 pounds. And he said it before, there aren't many people walking the earth that are that size and can do some of the things that PJ did. And yeah, people will say it's like, well, he wasn't the greatest defensive tackle that ever lived. I'm like, yeah, but for what he did for Penn State, he was important to try and stabilize that run defense. Caleb Artis at 6'4", 320 pounds, while he is a redshirt freshman, showed some flashes in the blue-white game to the point that, hell, I don't know necessarily if you're going to see a lot of him. You might not see much of him. But when you have a dude on the bench that's 320 freaking pounds and you want to be able to throw him in there in maybe an obvious run-stopping situation, he could be the dude to plug up the middle and be, helmet on helmet right in the A-gap. Who knows?
I have a recruiting philosophy of any defensive player's offense or defensive lineman, collect big guys, right? We get into this thing of evaluation where you follow for the sexy guy that move well, right? Looking for the offensive lineman that are dancing bears, or you're looking for the defensive linemen that are extremely twitchy. But at the end of the day, man, you have to collect big guys and make these coaches that get paid lots of money develop them into what they need to be, especially at that defensive line position, because you just don't have that many humans walking the earth that are that size and that mobile to be able to play the defensive line position. So when you have those, I think those are extremely valuable especially for top tier football teams.
Mm-hmm. And probably a lack of pressure for him to start and do some things. So maybe that's a
Even
good
better.
option for Caleb. So that's just me rambling into a vacuum. Let's talk about offense because everybody's like, all right, what's going on with Drew Aller? What's going on with quarterbacks? All that stuff. It sounds like the consensus has been through camp that most of the first team reps have been going to Drew Aller. So if anybody is betting futures in terms of who's going to start week 1 against West Virginia, you can take a wild guess. I talked about that scrimmage that went down this past Saturday night. It was rainy. It was nasty out. Kudos to everybody that was trying to A, compete in that weather, and then B, was just physically out there either observing or taking part in what was happening. And it sounded like Drew Aller, it was up and down, but that was part of the weather. And again, I want to emphasize to people to not freak out and to not be like, oh my God, maybe it's not necessarily right there. And we were talking about it a little before. It is just kind of understood that going into this part of the year, the defense will be ahead of the offense. Is there anything to worry about in your mind in regards to the maturation of Drew Aller?
Nope, not at all. I don't think there's anything to worry about. I mean, football is such a unique game of people working together, and especially when you talk about a lot of those gaps of individuals working together being covered up by hustle, speed, length. When we talk about the things that Penn State defenses possesses, right? And so when you talk about offense, where you got new weapons, whether it's Drew Aller stepping in for his first year, even though he's been within the program, but that's a major piece that's getting acclimated with the new receivers, Keandre Lambert-Smith taking a new role. Hopefully you see him like take that step to being that one-touch guy consistently, right? Like a go-to, we need to play. Boom. Interesting to see how Dante Cephas fits in with the lineup. Is like, was the transfer worth it in his career, right? Does he jump in and make an impact? Because like all these different type of things are, I think is interesting because in the college game that we're in, everything is essentially case studies, right? Whether it's like talent acquisition through NIL, whether it's transfer portal, different type of situations, or how we're just dealing with the development of different players. So I'm saying all to say with the offense, I mean, you have a little discrepancies on how they develop because you're probably throwing the ball. You get in the game, man, you can hand the ball off to 10, hand the ball off to 13, make a short pass, do this. And it gets different when you're moving the change. And let's not lose sight of our offense is going against an elite defense. Like that's also, I mean, regardless of just the standard issue of football that the defense is always ahead of the offense to start the season, this defense is also elite, has the makings of being elite. So temper that.
You love to say it, iron sharpens iron, and that sounds exactly like what we're dealing with. From everything that I've been reading and hearing is that Drew Aller is slowly moving into that leadership position and I'm not saying that it's the exact same thing, but it was a big question going into the offseason. Sean Clifford was looked up to within that team as a leader on offense, leader for the entire team. And I'm not saying that Drew Aller has completely filled those shoes. However, it sounds like he is growing into the role and is making the appropriate calls at the line, which was something you and I talked about with Daryl Clark last week was, hey, he's got to be able to do these things. We know he's got a live arm. We know what he can do in the passing game, and it's a matter of him now going out and doing it consistently. And I really like that he's getting to do it against like, oh, by the way, there's Kalen King, Bednarik watch list. Oh, and there's Abdul Carter, Bednarik watch list. Oh, there's Chop Robinson, Bednarik watch list. Like it's just murderer's row when you're dealing with this defense, it sounds like. So it's a good situation that hopefully once you get to that first game against West Virginia, it's like, oh, this is a little lighter than I expected it to be.
When you watch all the old 30 for 30s and they talk like whether it's the Miami teams or LSU, whoever, like great teams, and they talk about the practices or how competitive they were. It's like, well, I gained my confidence because I was going against this person. I was going against that person. I didn't even really win in practice until I got into the games. Hopefully that's the type of dynamic that's being created at Penn State, especially with Drew and this offense. Like it doesn't lack talent, but they're going against a very talented and decorated defense right now that has been playing together for a while.
Mm-hmm. Also in these past few open practices, people have gotten to see a little bit more of the running backs and nothing out of the ordinary in regards to Singleton and Allen. But if anything, there was a light shown on Trey Potts, who you and I have talked about, transfer from Minnesota. Final year of eligibility, is expected to be the number 3 running back. Jawan Sider is very high on him. And if anything, looking at the schedule, would you foresee certain games where Singleton and Allen get pulled after a while, and then it is the Trey Potts show just to eat up certain games?
I don't think you go into any games with the plan of not giving your running backs a chance to get touches and get into a rhythm. So if there's a game that gets out of hand, if we want to look at a schedule that says like, okay, maybe I don't know. I'm not going to
Delaware.
call it. I'm not. Let's say Delaware. These guys are blowing them out. I don't know even if Trey Potts fits into that situation because like Trey Potts is a senior running back that has played Big Ten football where he's going to have valuable carries and valuable instances where he's going to step into the game. So I think it's more working him into the mix when he's needed as a part of that 3-back system more so than leaning on to him when it's like a blowout type of situation. Because I think he brings another dynamic, whether his ability to catch out of the backfield. I always remember, I haven't seen him too much in college, but coming out of high school, like a very downhill, one-cut guy that was elusive and, again, a very mature runner. So, like, that type of back fitting in with what they got going on, maybe just add another dynamic and personnel mismatches to throw in there. So I don't really see him as a garbage time running back. I see him as fulfilling a pretty significant role, especially now that everyone knows about Katron Allen and Nick Singleton.
Mm-hmm. And you got 2 young freshmen behind him that have a lot of promise as well. Not to mention your cousin is back there, Tank. So,
absolutely put all them in. Yeah, but you can run the ball, man.
Tank was excellent last year. When Tank got in there, he lived up to his freaking name. So
he's a load. I wouldn't want to tackle him. He probably would separate my shoulder, little cuz.
According to Daryl Clark, you didn't want to tackle any. I'm kidding.
No. I mean, it's cool. I didn't really want to, but I was about it though. I would tackle. They know
you
that.
were. No, 1,000% were. That's what's going on with the running backs. Wide receiver. There had been discussion early in camp, and especially when Dante Cephas had just gotten on campus, especially you were just talking about him, that Dante was looking like, oh, okay, this is as advertised. This is going to be the number 1 wide receiver. And I'm not saying that conversation has dwindled, but it sounds like the promise and hope for Keandre Lambert-Smith might be realized, and that the words spark and flash are consistently associated with him, and that the guy that we saw really come on a little bit at the end of last season, especially in the Rose Bowl, and look like, ooh, that could be the next guy in line, the next, number 1 for Penn State. We might be seeing that. So what have you heard?
Same thing that you have heard is that Keandre is taking that step, right? When you talk about that splash player to be consistently showing up and taking some of the pressure off of Drew and the running backs, right? Because at the end of the day, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm stacking up the box and making the offense beat me by throwing the ball. Like, they haven't proven that they had enough weapons to make me respect it. Until you have someone like a Keandre Lambert-Smith that takes you 70 yards uptown and he's doing his little dance, like, that's the type of stuff that makes a defensive coordinator change. But until that happens consistently, you need him to show up, and you want to see more. I mean, not see more, but you want to see or hear Dante Cephas step up. It's according to Audrey in our article, he's like still working through the different aspects of getting into the offense. And that's typical, right? And especially the rumblings coming out of how impressive he is just from a brute athlete. Cephas is an incredible athlete. When you talk about working in the offensive structure, new plays, new guys that you're playing with, I think there's going to be a maturation and a gelling process with him in general. He's only been with the team for the past 3 months. So I think that should be tempered as well. But I would really love to see Keandre come out and be a dominant force from game 1.
And let's not forget, the competition at this position seems ruthless to me, in that I think there's people expecting this to be a down year for the wide receiver group. And I kind of disagree, in that it's just, it's extremely competitive. And I know that's a really overused term when it comes to football, but Trey Wallace, we know what he can be as a number 2. Omari Evans came in at exactly the same time as Drew Aller, and those two have been in lockstep for the most part, which has been great to see. Caden Saunders is being talked about potentially for some kick return duties that might go to Nick Singleton. You're gonna have to see what happens there exactly. Like, do you want to just really protect Singleton, or do you want to make kind of like when Saquon was here, and it's like, we're gonna make you threatened every single time that there is a play, period. And then at wide receiver, again, Malik McClain, transfer from Florida State, great size. Malik Mega is not going quietly into the good night and is continuing to fight. And then a name that I think is no surprise to me is Liam Clifford, is that the back end of last season, the opportunities that he got in games, he was that wide receiver that just found a hole in the zone and made good catches, got some yards after the catch. Was he going to burn you? Not necessarily, but a smart route runner who understands the defense. He looked good in the blue-white game, and it sounds like through camp he's progressed as well. And it's kind of the dark horse that nobody's really been talking about, because I think there's some fans who would like to not hear the term Clifford said again. But at the same time, it's like Liam's doing well.
You give that's a great point. And he has somebody that always shows up in the stat line or even in stories as making a splash or showing up. When I talk about that nickel position and covering players that are in the middle of the field, it's guys like Liam, right? When they're running those switch routes in the middle of the field, your Wes Welkers, your Danny Amendolas, not just saying short white guys. I mean, I'm not trying to say that, but smaller slot receivers that have an ability of finding openings in the defense and making a catch. I think that's extremely valuable, especially if you're, have some burst of speed and some short area quickness and just ability to catch the ball. I think that's a valuable piece. I mean, just take that and upgrade it. That's a Parker Washington. That's a 5th round draft pick in the NFL. That you can do that and have the ability to make, one-touch plays and explosive plays on the offensive side of the ball. So I think it's extremely valuable. And that is somebody that I overlooked or don't mention enough that can show a lot of value in the offense. I think we don't hear too much about him internally because Penn State has a great star or nickel in Day or Daquan Hardy on the defensive side. So they probably battle it out internally.
Yeah. Us short white guys are doing everything that we can, Justin. We're trying.
Coach, slot receivers, man, it's a great position. It's nothing wrong with it.
No, there isn't. And listen, I've spoken to the great Graham Zug in the past. Graham Zug was a killer at one point for Penn State.
Let's not stay on that. Graham Zug is cold, man. One of the best receivers to do it. Graham was not. He
wasn't again not the biggest or fastest.
Graham was smooth though. Like he was smooth. Yeah. He was about 6'1", 6'2", had long catch radius. He wasn't in that Wes Welker mold. He was more like a different version of like a Jordy Nelson, something smoother. He's more in that area, like an outside type of receiver. Graham was sweet. Graham was a sweet receiver, man.
When I was playing high school football, granted, I was not playing nearly the level of anybody that we're talking about but looked up to a guy like Graham Zug. I was like, oh, okay, similar measurables, and saw what he could do. It made you feel like you could do it, which was great. For me, within the Big Ten, I look at Charlie Jones, who lit it up at Purdue last year.
Absolutely.
So again, not just a slim white guy or something like that, but it's like, no, Liam Clifford's game has a reasonable comp to these guys. So
absolutely,
we've hyped up Liam Clifford a lot. So we're going to leave it at that.
Go, Liam.
Yeah.
Shout out to Clifford though, man. He gets on the preseason game with the Packers. Like, I know you might not want to hear about it, but like that scrappiness, that's something that we want to see from Drew Aller. That's one trait that we don't want to lose from a Penn State quarterback. I know we spoke about a little bit with Adam Brenneman. We were talking about the characteristics of a quarterback, and it's just like that toughness and scrappiness. I always felt comfortable going into a game when I knew that I'm not questioning our quarterback's toughness or just grit. Because that's what it takes. I mean, being back there when Trace was in at the quarterback position, Trace was one of the toughest football players that I've seen in my whole career, from playing and my time off the field. But that's what it was. I mean, you want to talk about arm talent and the different things. If you're just evaluating a quarterback, if just a blind evaluation, you might say Clifford's better than Trace. But when it comes to those different intangibles of just that grit and competitive endurance and being able to deal with those different type of things, different outcomes.
Yeah. At tight end, no real surprises from what we understand. Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren.
Let him play.
Yeah. 1 and 2 in whichever order you see it, which is a really good thing to have. My expectation, based on everything I'm hearing in terms of who's succeeding and who's getting the reps and shining right now in camp, is Joey Schlaffer has looked good and Khalil Dinkins has looked good. Khalil Dinkins was maybe the most talked about player coming out of the spring practice period by James Franklin and the rest of the coaching staff. So I expect to see those guys battling for the 3 and 4 spot.
NFL legacy. Dad played tight end in the NFL as well. So it's like you like to see those things continue to matriculate down.
Yeah. And I am never forgetting about Andrew Rapplier, who people are continuing to compare to the Pat Freiermuth. So we haven't heard a ton about him, still getting acclimated, came in late was not one of the winter workout arrivals in this class, but you never know. You never know what can happen. Offensive line. There are, I think, fans out there who are like, hey, how are we doing on depth? Because you know what you have a pretty good feeling that you're, from left to right, you expect it to be Fashanu, Tangwall, Nourzad, Wormley, Caden Wallace. From what I understand, Olu Fashanu has looked every bit the part that everybody expects him to be, one of the first 2 offensive tackles off the board this upcoming year in the NFL draft. Landon Tangwall was missing this weekend from practice. He's been on the show before, so hopefully that's not anything significant. Hunter Nourzad did have injury issues last year, but is moving to center where he has had success when he was at Cornell and has done it a little bit, obviously, now at Penn State. Sal Wormley, we expect to be the right guard. And then Caden Wallace, from what I understand, has made the leap the coaching staff wanted him to make, in that it was a question at the back end of last season. It was like, hey, do we need to make a change at right tackle? And it sounds like Wallace has stepped up. What have you heard overall about the front 5?
I mean, the front 5, I think, just consistently throughout the offseason has been an expectation to meet where they were last year, right? With another year with the running backs coming up to just in the maturation of their process. But there's a time, like you said, with Olu being a top 10 type of pick, and the rest of the offensive line continue to grow into that maturity. I mean, I think the difference is now there's an expectation for them to play at a certain level, which is a lot different than even last year, because we were like, hey, can the offensive line hold up? So I think there's just a little bit of a different mentality when you're having expectations versus trying to live up and prove people wrong. So with that is being able to play with those expectations, I think, is a critical piece for the offensive line.
Yeah, and just stay healthy, ideally.
100%.
I know that's really easy to say, but again, to make a run like people are hoping for from the Penn State Nittany Lions this year, health is the most important thing. There's so much ability on this team, and it can go awry as easily with 1 or 2 injuries in a few different positions. That's the truth. Thank you all so much for joining us on this episode. Get in the comments section. Let us know what you've seen and heard, what you like, what you're nervous about, what you're excited about. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And just a little preview for what's coming up next week, Justin, because we had the opportunity to sit down with former Penn State running back Journey Brown recently for an interview that's going to air this coming Wednesday. And Justin, I'm very fortunate I've had the chance to be on this platform for the past 2 years and getting to know a lot of former Penn State football players, past and present, that matter. This was one of the most emotional conversations I've ever gotten to have with an athlete. What was your takeaway?
I mean, it was a special interview for me, especially seeing Journey coming out of high school, seeing the route he took in his career, the development, and just the kind of the pitfall, and the way that he told the story about, very introspectively, how he went through it and how he landed to where he is now. It was extremely inspiring, and it was great to see someone's athletic journey, no pun intended, turn out the way his did.
Yeah, so that will be airing this coming Wednesday right here on State of State. Thank you all very much for joining us. We'll catch you next time. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, let us know what you think of the show on Twitter @TheKing1 and @TomHannafin. State of State is presented by Bet Online.